Hear these powerful words from one of my favorite prophets, Micah. It's from chapter 4, verses 1 through 5. In days to come, the mountain of the Holy One's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised up above the hills. Peoples shall stream to it, and many nations shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Holy One, to the house of the God of Jacob, that God may teach us God's ways, and that we may walk in God's paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Holy One from Jerusalem. God shall judge between many peoples, and shall arbitrate between strong nations far away. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. But they shall all sit under their own vines and under their own fig trees, and no one shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. For all the peoples walk, each in the name of its God, and we will walk in the name of the Holy One our God forever and ever." For the wisdom contained in these holy words, we give thanks. Amen.
Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What seems conceit, bad manners, or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You don't know what wars are going on down where the spirit meets the bone. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. For the mouth of the Holy One of hosts has spoken. Micah gives us a glimpse of what shalom, comprehensive well-being, beloved community, peace looks like in the scripture passage Betsy just read and we just heard, and we know very well here at Peace United Church of Christ. Clint McCann, a beloved Eden professor, claims this text to be God's "I have a dream" speech. No more war, no more learning about war, implements of war transformed into farm equipment. People own the means of production, and at that time it was land sitting under their own vines and under their own fig trees, which suggests economic equity, and if you notice, in there, the radical idea of Sabbath, because they're sitting, resting. And no one makes people afraid. No intimidation or bullying or threats of violence. No policies or laws that create fear in the hearts of people. Peace. Imagine that. The one who will be born soon, the one we are waiting for in this season, Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, the Prince of Peace. This one, born into a time where none of God's dreams seemed even close to becoming a reality. This one will continue the message of peace through his radical life and teaching. We, here at Peace, have pondered this text on many occasions. For some of you, it might be too many occasions. We've dug into what it means to participate in making God's dream become real. Our vision and mission are rooted in this text, creating a radically inclusive, just, compassionate, and sustainable community mobilized toward comprehensive well-being. Peace, United Church of Christ, is an open, affirming congregation, lives out the radical teachings of Jesus, and works in solidarity with all to achieve well-being, justice, and equity for God's creation. Can you hear God's "I have a dream" speech at the heart of the words we strive to live into? The world we inhabit today seems as far away from God's dream as it must have when Jesus was born in that little town of Bethlehem. The work God calls us into is difficult and dangerous, as it was for Jesus. And still our answer to this call is yes. We've been intentional about how we use our resources and energy to join God's work in the world. God's dream for peace is our dream too. Today, I want us to take a step back from all of that, take a step back and in, which is scary for me. I want us to ponder what it means for our hearts to be filled with peace, to do a little internal, contemplative inventory. Years ago, Therese Christiani gave me a card. It sits on my desk to this day. This is what it says: peace. It does not mean to be a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart. What would it take for us to get to this place? You see, if we could find some peace in our own hearts, even in the midst of all the chaos we are experiencing in the world, it would go a long way toward the realization of God's dream. What I'm saying is, what if we started working for God's dream in ourselves, embodied peace, realized that God is indeed with us, among us, in us, within us. We are beloved children of God. We can experience well-being in our hearts because God resides there. Another prophet, Hosea, who I don't like as much as Micah, by the way, gave us words from God at a time when God was so very angry at the people for having turned away from God and God's dream. God contemplated giving up and turning away from the people. So dismayed was God at their behavior. Here's what God decided instead: I will not press my fierce anger. I will not return to destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not a person, the Holy One in your most inward parts, and I will not come to destroy. God with us, among us, in our most inward parts. And if we work the equation through, math people, we come to the realization that if God is in our most inward parts, well then God's dream for peace resides within us as well. Which of course suggests getting in touch with our most inward parts is probably a really good idea. This internal work is perhaps the hardest work of all because it requires us to look inside ourselves, even in the midst of all the noise of the world, and find calm. We might have to make some changes in ourselves, so much more difficult than asking others to change policies or laws or their ideas, isn't it? Here's just a few things to consider. Internal work involves having compassion for ourselves. Loving ourselves. We all make mistakes. The question is, can we give ourselves grace in those times like we might give someone else grace? It requires us to embody the idea that we are, in fact, beloved children of God, no matter what, created in God's image. If God is in us, well, how can we not be beloved? In this work, it is essential, I suppose, this is the hard one, to embrace the words Jesus gave us about not worrying, for as we all know, worrying does not allow for a peaceful soul. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly parent feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? Let me just say that last sentence again. And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? And in fact, I would suggest science tells us that in fact it will take away from our span of life. There's so much more about this internal work that we could talk about, and I'm not an expert on any of this, haven't actually accomplished any of the things I just talked about. I too am a work in progress. I hope, though, you get what I mean in all of this. I don't want to stop here, though. I cannot stop here, for you see, the idea of God within us, of God's dream for peace within us, does not stop with us. If we look at the equation, God is with us, among us, in our most inward parts. Therefore, if God is in our most inward parts, well, then God's dream for peace resides within us as well. If we take this equation to its conclusion, we must come to the realization that God's dream for peace lives in every human being, because God resides in every human being's most inward parts. That means the person who voted differently than you, the person who cut you off in traffic, the person who annoys you beyond all understanding, the neighbor who plays their music too loud, the patronizing official in public office, and there are a lot of them around, let me just tell you that. These people are beloved children of God. God is in their most inward parts too. Isn't that just something? So when we look someone in the eye, we are seeing God look back at us. What would it mean to the world if we understood this to be true? Why is it so easy for us to accept this truth about Jesus, that Jesus is the incarnation of God, come to us on earth, and not accept it as truth for each other? A number of years ago, I was at an event at Eden in this very room. The facilitator of the session asked us to divide into pairs. He asked us to sit opposite each other with our knees almost touching, and then he asked us to have one person just sit and be, while the other person looked into their eyes with love. Not for 30 seconds or a minute, but for 5 minutes. I began, because I thought this was going to be easier, by looking into my partner's eyes. And as the clock ticked on, the woman I sat knee to knee with began to cry. Tears slid down her face unchecked. When she reflected with the group later, she said she could not remember a time when anyone had looked into her eyes with such intention and love. Her heart simply broke open. It was a powerful experience to look into someone's eyes with love and intention, seeing God's face looking back, and to experience the same thing in return. It takes the instruction to love God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as you do yourself, to a whole different level, doesn't it? When you think about God being in our most inward parts. Just think about that for a minute. The world, I expect, or at least the very small corner of it we exist in, would change if we could understand God's presence within us and experience that in each other. God's dream for shalom, comprehensive well-being, beloved community, peace, might actually come to pass if we did. In the meantime, as we wait for this child who will be born in a time of discord and turmoil, oppression and violence, a child who will, in the midst of it all, preach a gospel of peace. Let us, in our time of discord and turmoil, oppression and violence, understand that God's dream for peace resides within us and within all humanity. It is ours to share. And let us receive again this blessing in the chaos. To all that is chaotic in you, let there come silence. Let there be a calming of the clamoring, a stilling of the voices that have laid their claim on you, that have made their home in you, that go with you even to the holy places, but will not let you rest, will not let you hear your life with wholeness or feel the grace that fashioned you. Let what distracts you cease. Let what divides you cease. Let there come an end to what diminishes and demeans, and let depart all that keeps you in its cage. Let there be an opening into the quiet that lies beneath the chaos, where you find the peace you did not think possible, and see what shimmers within the storm. May it be so.